So today we're going to be talking about some stuff that you might not remember. Now the odds are anyone who's watching this video is going to know what all of this stuff is, and you're probably going to somewhat remember it, but there's a chance that some of you might have temporarily blocked some of these things out of your memory, and hopefully when you watch this video, you're going to stop and say, hey, I remember that. So summertime is definitely over. It's actually the holiday season right now, but summer is my favorite time of year, and I like to always try and keep that vibe going. So we're gonna start this video off with a summertime activity.
Number 5, water balloons.
Now I'm sure you all remember playing with water balloons, and a lot of you are probably saying, hey, water balloons still exist. And that's true, but did you know that the way kids are doing water balloons now is way different than the way we were doing it? So over the summer, my son came to me and was like, Dad, can we have a water balloon fight? And I said, absolutely. And so we went to the store to get some water balloons, but the only problem is when we got there, this is what we found. So this is the way kids are doing water balloons now. And if you don't know what this is, I'm gonna try and explain this to you. So basically, every box comes with these little plastic pieces that screw onto your water faucet, and there's straws coming off of the plastic pieces, and at the end of the straws, there's water balloons. You turn on your faucet, all of the water balloons fill up at the same time, and when they're done filling up, they drop off and you don't even have to tie them, they seal themselves. It's actually really convenient and pretty cool, but I like to do things the way that I remember them. And I mean, besides that, if you're playing with water balloons and at the end of the day, you don't have a bunch of different colored rubber bands on the faucet, are you really playing with water balloons? Now, two things that you need to know about these water balloons is one, for every, I don't know how many come on each plastic piece. I want to say there's maybe 10. So for every 10 that you fill up, maybe 3 or 4 are going to pop. And I know you're probably saying to yourself, well, the same thing happened with the water balloons that we used to play with. But that brings me to the second thing. The water balloons that we used to play with were what, like 50 cents, 75 cents a bag? This is the price of the new water balloons. So for that price, every stinking balloon better work. So I told my son that we could still have a water balloon fight, but we were gonna track down some old school water balloons. And so we went on a hunt, and we went to grocery stores, pharmacies, 7-Elevens, dollar stores. We could not find regular water balloons anywhere. But finally, after probably like the 3rd or 4th grocery store that we went into, we finally found something that was similar to the water balloons that we used to get back in the day. It wasn't 50 or 75 cents per bag, which I already expected that. And it actually didn't come in a bag. It came in this plastic tube, but the balloons inside were similar to the ones that we used to get. Now, what I would have really liked to find were the grenade balloons. Do you remember those? There wasn't really anything different about them. They were just green, and they had this grid painted on them so that when you filled them up with water, they looked like little hand grenades. Now, probably the biggest difference with the balloons that we found wasn't the packaging, but it was, of course, the price. I want to say they were about $4, which is still a lot better than those other balloons. And like I said, I didn't really expect to pay 50 or 75 cents for a pack of water balloons. So we grabbed the balloons and headed home and got ready to have our water balloon fight. And I mean, who doesn't like getting hit in the bare back with a big fat water balloon? Or even better, an underfilled water balloon. So yes, of course, water balloons still exist. They're just a little bit different. And really, I just wanted you to stop and think for a second and remember those water balloon fights that you had as a kid and how awesome those times really were.
Number 4, calling 411.
Okay, so imagine that you want to call a local store. Maybe it's Friday night and you want to call the local video store and see what time they close, but how are you going to get their phone number? Well, of course, today you're just going to pull out your cell phone, type in the name of the store. You're not going to call them. You're just going to go to their social media and send them a twack or whatever, and then they're going to write you back, and yeah, no actual human interaction. But back in the 80s, of course, that wasn't an option, so we had a couple of different things we could do. Number one, you could get the Yellow Pages, and if you don't know what the Yellow Pages is, I'm sure you do though, it was basically a phone book. It was this big book that you would flip through in alphabetical order, and it had all of your local stores in there. You would find the store you wanted, and it had the phone number and address. You'd call them up and get the information you wanted. But if you didn't have the Yellow Pages handy, or you were just feeling lazy, your other option was to call 411. So you would pick up your phone, no, not that, I'm talking about this, and you would call 411. Someone would then pick up on the other end and say, information, what city please? You would then respond with something like, North Hollywood, dial a tape. And then after a few seconds, they would either give you the phone number, or sometimes they would directly connect you to the store. Now, I actually didn't find out about 411 until I was maybe like 10 or 11 years old. My dad told me to call a store and find out what time they closed. And when I went to get the phone book, he was like, oh, just call 411. And I was like, huh? And then he explained it to me. I called 411. And because I was such a little weirdo, my mind was completely blown. And then after that, I looked for any excuse to call information. I would call like multiple times a day, and then call stores and just ask random questions. I don't know. I obviously needed more friends. But the only problem was my dad didn't tell me that I think it was only the first calls to 411 per month were free. And then after that, they charged you. And it wasn't too expensive, maybe like 15 cents per call or something like that, maybe a quarter. But I called so much that it added up. And when we got the next phone bill, my dad was pretty angry. Of course, it wasn't like a $500 phone bill. There was, I don't know, maybe $2 worth of 411 calls, but it was unnecessary. So of course my dad was a little angry about it. And after that, I promised to kick back a little bit. And then from that moment on, I had to kind of, pick and choose when I called 411 and when I used the phone book. And if by some chance maybe you had never heard of calling 411, where do you think the expression came from? What's the 411?
What's the 411, hon?
What's the 411, hon?
Which of course means, what's the info? Info, 411, but, well, I guess no one really uses that expression anymore. So if you've never heard of calling 411, you've probably never heard that expression. So whatever, never mind.
Number 3, the Time Lady.
Okay, I've got another crazy scenario for you. Let's say you needed to know what time it was. Now, I know none of you are wearing a watch, so again, obviously, you're just gonna pull out your cell phone. But again, back in the 80s and 90s, that wasn't an option. So if we wanted to know what time it was, we would look at the VCR. But let's say someone tripped over the power cable, unplugged the VCR, and now it's flashing 12, and you can't reset it because you don't know what the accurate time is. So you have one option, and that's to call the time lady. So there was a phone number that you would call, and I'm really ashamed to admit that I don't remember what the local phone number was for my area, but you would call this phone number and there would be a recorded voice that would say,
Good evening. At the tone, Pacific Daylight Time will be 7:53 and 50 seconds.
and that was it. That was the entire purpose of that phone number. And you could literally just sit there and listen to time go by. And this phone number also came in handy if you wanted to pretend like you were talking to someone. If you wanted to be on the phone but you didn't have any friends, you could just call the time lady and pretend.
Hi, how's it going?
At the tone, Pacific Daylight Time will be 12:14 exactly.
Now, of course, nowadays there's no use for a phone number like that because everybody has cell phones and we always know what time it is. But I gotta admit, I kinda miss the sound of the time lady's voice.
Number 2, the Weather Channel.
Okay, so now you've got the address for the video store, you know what time they close, you're ready to go pick up a videotape, but you don't know if you have to put on a raincoat. You don't know what the weather's gonna be. So what are you gonna do? I know you're gonna check your cell phone, but again, that was not an option for us. So in the 80s and 90s, we had a couple of choices. We could look outside and see what the weather looked like, but if we wanted to know what the weather was gonna be like for, maybe the next couple of days, we could either watch the news, read the newspaper, or if we wanted to quickly find out what the weather was gonna be like, we could watch the Weather Channel. That's right, there was an entire channel dedicated to the weather. So the way that the Weather Channel worked is you would have these weather people that would stand there telling you the weather just like they did on the news. They would tell you what the weather was gonna be like in different parts of the country. And then every I don't know, I'm guessing maybe like 5 minutes or so, they would show you your local forecast. And that was a pre-recorded segment where they would show you what the weather was going to be like in your area. And they played this smooth jazz music, and they would show you everything. They would show you what the humidity was going to be like, what the fog was going to be like, of course, if it was going to rain, if it was going to be sunny. And the local forecast is what you were really turning on the Weather Channel to see. That's what everyone wanted to watch. But this is the way it always went. No matter what, you would turn on the Weather Channel, and as soon as you turned it on, you would hear like the last 2 seconds of that smooth jazz, and you would know that the local forecast was wrapping up. And then it would go into the segment with the weather person, and you'd be sitting there waiting for the local forecast to come on again, and you'd say, all right, I'm gonna go use the bathroom while I'm waiting. And then you'd come out of the bathroom and you would hear that smooth jazz music coming to an end again, and you would have to sit there and wait another 5 minutes. That's how it always went. I don't care what you say. That's how it worked with the Weather Channel. And believe it or not, the Weather Channel was actually a really big thing back in the 80s and 90s, so much so that Vector Hold, a lot of you know who that is. He's the artist that I use a lot of his music for some of my videos. And he actually has an entire album called 7 Day Forecast, which that was part of your local forecast. That's where you would see what the weather was going to be like for the next 7 days. And so he has an entire album called 7 Day Forecast with songs that he wrote that sound like that smooth jazz that they would play during your local forecast. And the first time I heard that album, it instantly brought me back to sitting in front of my TV watching the Weather Channel. It was really awesome. And for whatever reason, I actually have a lot of memories of sitting around in the 90s watching the Weather Channel. I mean, it did actually rain a lot in Southern California in the 90s, and since I was a skater, that's probably why I watched the Weather Channel so much, to see if it was gonna be raining, because if it was gonna be raining, then I couldn't go outside and skate. Makes sense.
Number 1. The TV Guide and TV Guide channel.
Okay, so I've got one more crazy scenario for you. So you've already called the video store, you know what time it is now, and you see that you don't have enough time to get to the video store. You know that it's gonna rain and you don't wanna leave the house, so you're gonna have to watch something on TV, but how are you gonna know what's on TV? Well, again, you've got a couple of different options. You could either just turn on the TV and flip around and see what's on, or you could pick up the TV Guide. Now, I'm sure most of you know what the TV Guide is. I'm pretty sure that it still exists, but I don't think a lot of people really use it anymore. The TV Guide was a small book that had everything that was going to be on TV for the week listed. It had all the times and all the shows that were going to be on. And then in the front of the TV Guide, there was articles that were related to TV and movies. But of course, using a TV Guide actually involved picking up a book and holding it in your hands and flipping through the pages. So if you didn't want to do that, then you would use the TV Guide channel. That's right, there was an entire channel dedicated to what was on TV. And so you would pick up your remote and turn on the TV, and instead of just flipping around and seeing what was on, you would go to the TV Guide channel. And there it would show you everything that was going to be on the TV that day. And on the top of the screen, it would show previews for different movies and TV shows. And I don't know why I have, just like I have a lot of memories of sitting around watching the Weather Channel, I also have a lot of memories of watching the TV Guide channel. I'm telling you, the 80s and 90s were an amazing time, but they were also a weird time. All right, so that is gonna do it for this first video, but I have got a long list of these things, so I am definitely gonna be making more videos like this. So I hope you enjoyed this because there's more to come. All right, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.